Okay, so in this slide presentation, we're going to look at technical communication. And we're going to look at effective communication and then also some briefly touch on the report formatting and sections. And this is specifically for your midterm projects. But the technical communication will go for any presentation or written report that you're going to do. So again, we're in the final phase of the problem solving. We finally made it all around the cycle to the communication phase. And some would say this is the most important phase. And I would definitely tell you that that is definitely a very important phase, because how we communicate a conclusion or a solution really has a very strong bearing on what people interpret that solution to be, or even if they even understand it or accept it from us. So we could have a really good, well thought out solution, to solve the world's issues, but if we can't communicate that effectively, who's going to care, right? So the communication phase is a really important final step, closing that loop. And so looking at effective communication, some things to be thinking about. We always want to strive to be clear, concise, yet thorough, okay? And so we can either have too much information or irrelevant information, and this is going to be confusing, okay? On the flip side, we may not have enough information, okay? And so both of these, are the ends of the spectrum that we really have to have, balance in between to really meet the needs of our audience in a way that they can understand what we're communicating to them, because that is really what determines how effective we communicate, is how our audience interprets what we're saying. Okay, so if we're saying things that they may not understand, or too much information they may not be able to comprehend, that's going to be confusing to them. As well, if we're saying hardly anything to them and they're asking, well, what about this? What about that? That's usually a sign that we haven't given them enough information. Okay, again, we got to thread the needle on this. And so when we present data, we want to also try and make it jump off the page or off the slide presentation so that it helps the reader or the audience, again, understand more quickly and easily without having to find it. We don't want our audience to have to go finding or searching for our conclusion, right? We want to be clear and concise and let it just jump out at them. And a lot of times we can use charts and graphs to really help drive this home for them. But when we do that, when we have a conclusion and when we say our solution, we really always want to try and be really clear to the reader in what data we're using to defend or build that conclusion on, right? So this is where the data-driven solution comes into play. But when we have a solution, we also want to make sure we tie that very clearly back to the data we're using. And do things like spell it out to the reader, right? Based on Table 2, it is clear that workplace injuries, so workplace injuries being our topic, have declined, right? That's our conclusion or solution, right? Since the new safety plan was implemented. So maybe we redesigned a safety plan, and that was the product of our problem solution process, and we're telling the reader or the audience that, and we're telling them that that conclusion, that statement, is based on the data we have in Table 2. Right? So they can look at that table, and hopefully that table is laid out clearly and concisely, and they can then see for themselves, based on numbers, right, based on data, that our conclusion is what we're saying it is. Okay? If we were to say just injuries have decreased, they might think says who or according to what. Right? We want to be clear on what that is based on. So some things to be thinking about. But really, audience, it all comes back to the audience. Okay, we're trying to help them understand in terms that they understand what we're saying. So we need to know our audience. Who are they? Okay, what's their knowledge level? What's their level of background related to the specific field or topic we're talking about? What might be unclear to them, right? A lot of times this comes into play when we use terms or words that the audience either doesn't understand or has a different definition for. So it's really helpful to define some of the terms we're using, like big ones being efficient, ones being increasing profit, or being more energy or less energy waste, right? So what does that mean? What energies are we not wasting as much? How do we define efficient, right? How do we define profit? Those things are going to help the reader or the audience understand what it is we're actually saying, okay? Also, big important key, we have to be cognizant that what people perceive we're saying is actually what they walk away with thinking you said, okay? So people's perception is important. It becomes their reality, okay? We have a small part to play in this to help them understand and give them information that they can use effectively to understand what we're saying. But really, it's a lot up to do, it has a lot to do with how people perceive what we're saying. And what can help us guard against this is just to have a friend or a peer or a colleague review our work, okay, before we present it. And that helps us to give a second set of eyes on what we're communicating to see if there's any glaring confusion in it. And we're actually going to do this in the midterm project. We're going to have teams, right, switch reports, and we're going to review each other's reports and comment on that and use that to better our final report. So turning to now report formatting, we've talked now about effective communication and how important the audience is and being clear. Now let's look at how are we actually going to format this report and what sections do we need to be able to give the conclusion and the solution that will be effective. So we can look at some formatting things. We want to use a rough range of 3 to 5 pages. This is including your data, not including the cover page, and not including the reference page. Okay, this is what you want to shoot for, this length of a page, of a report. It can be longer, but you have to sell me on why it should be longer. Okay, because again, this goes back to we don't want to report too few information or too much information. Okay, we're going to use Helvetica Neue 10-point font. This is already formatted in the template document that's on Blackboard, as well as the 0.5 inch margin. So these two things here are already formatted for you. We also want to make sure we have section titles for each section, bold and underlined. Okay, those are denoted in the template file, but we really need to make sure that that's also included in our report. This helps the reader see and follow the step-by-step process or the different phases of what we did. Also, whenever we generate charts, graphs, or diagrams, we want to use software programs to generate these. No hand sketches, okay? The only time I'll allow a hand sketch is if you have 3 or so alternate designs where you sketch up the brainstorming designs, right? And at that point, I'll allow a hand sketch. But once you decide on a final design, I want to see it worked up in a AutoCAD, Inventor, some type of 3D or 2D modeling software package. Also, all charts, all graphs, all diagrams need to have units and titles. Okay, I don't want to have to look for and try and understand what are your units. You don't want your audience to try and figure that out themselves. You want to, again, be clear, okay, and present the information. They don't have to look for the solution. So let's just briefly touch on the 2 main components of your midterm project. So we have a draft report and a final report. Your draft report, you're going to have reviewed and discussed with your teammate. Okay, you're going to review theirs, they'll review yours. This is the self and peer evaluation section of the midterm project. Okay, once you've done that, then you can revise for your final report based on the review that you had from your draft report. Okay, and of course your final report and your draft report, both of these you will submit on Blackboard. So you'll submit both of those to Blackboard as we move forward. You can again look at the project report template document. Okay, that's on Blackboard. This is where you go to get that template with some of that formatting structure already set up. Okay, and I would ask you and encourage you to go at this point now and review that. So look at that and start working on putting that together with your conclusion to your project. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you in class.